Hello everybody, my name is David Leith. I'm the product manager for Uptime Software. I'd like to welcome you to the third installment of our webinar series delivered to lifeboat resellers, partners, and end users. Today I'll be talking about simplifying IT management across your physical, virtual, and cloud servers. Now before I begin, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about some housekeeping items. First off, if you are simply logged into the conference line, I do invite you to also log into the WebEx session so you can see today's PowerPoint presentation and some of the slides that I'll be referencing throughout the call. A copy of this presentation will be made available at the end of the session, so if you can't see the slides right now, don't worry too much about it. That will be made available within 24 hours. Also, we will have time for a Q&A at the end of today's session, so we'll spend about 5 to 10 minutes in Q&A. Feel free to use the Q&A or the chat panel on the right-hand side of your WebEx window and ask your questions there. I'll do my best to get to all the questions that are brought up during the session, and if I can't get to them, I'll do my best to respond directly to each of you after the session has completed. So let's jump right into it. So again, my name is David Leith, and today I'm going to be talking about simplifying IT management across your physical, virtual, and cloud servers. So I'm going to cover three specific topics today. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges associated with monitoring and managing your physical, virtual, and cloud environments. I'm going to talk about how to get a little bit smarter in that management and monitoring, how to keep it simple so you can overall improve your IT service delivery in your environment. And then I'll talk very specifically about 5 steps to take you from perhaps the beginning stages of a monitoring framework across your physical virtual cloud environment to some of the more efficient, smarter ways to actually manage your environment. And then I'll be wrapping up with a Q&A. So first, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges of the typical monitoring approach and management approach in a PVC or physical, virtual, and cloud environment. It's very common in an environment to basically assign individual silos and individual responsibilities within your IT department or within your IT team, specifically assigning individual users to either database applications, web applications, maybe it's a team specific to the SAN or just physical servers, maybe it's individual Windows servers or Linux servers. All this segmentation is typically implemented, and each of those groups will end up implementing their own monitoring and management tools for their little segment of the environment. It's a very typical approach to do that, and what we call that is tool soup. So you'll typically roll out a collection of individual point tools focused at each of the silos within the broader context of IT. And this can lead to a lot of challenges in simply maintaining this environment, and leads to a lot of overhead going on in the simple monitoring of your environment. Now, each of these teams typically have their own tooling to manage and monitor their environment. And then, of course, all of these individual teams will report up to maybe a director of IT or a VP, maybe a data center manager. And that manager is typically presented with a problem of simply having no single version of the truth and the status of their environment. So because each of the teams maintaining their own little segment of the broader IT environment have their own tools, that manager simply can't get a single report or a single dashboard that encompasses in a unified way the entire IT infrastructure. And that's a very big challenge, particularly in virtual environments. And moving on to the next slide, we can see that approach of segmenting monitoring for individual silos of responsibilities works reasonably well when all of the individual silos are separate and there's not a lot of conversations going on between the different teams. Unfortunately, the reality of how IT services are delivered in a physical, virtual, and cloud environment is that many components of each application or service will be spread across the different tiers of your infrastructure. So you'll have some components running on physical servers, some components running in your virtualization stack, maybe multiple virtualization stacks. Perhaps you have VMware, vSphere, some P-Series or Power VM environment, maybe Solaris or Oracle Zones environment. And then if you're certainly on the bleeding edge of application deployment, perhaps you're also wrapping in cloud resources to serve some of those burst needs or instantaneous capacity needs in your environment. So the reality of a modern service delivery is that those individual silos simply don't make sense. Right? An application is going to be spread out across all the different parts of your environment, be them internal, virtual, or cloud. And at the highest level, monitoring these things from an individual silo point of view really takes away from the end goal, which is the realization that you are delivering, as an IT team, a service to your end users. So for the individual silo administrators or team administrators, it's very easy to get hyper-focused and kind of lost in the details of your own little segment of the environment, but very difficult to step upstream and start remembering that, yes, we are maintaining a database server, but this database server is delivering a key component of this IT service. Your IT managers, IT directors, generally they actually start thinking at that service level. So they're going to think very specifically about that end user, how that end user needs to interact with the IT service, and what are some of the key business metrics that that service is designed to deliver? Maybe there's metrics around mean time to repair or response time for an application, or maybe there's more business aligned metrics such as the number of purchases per hour that can be delivered by this service. Focusing on service delivery at this higher level is essential to effectively managing your environment and effectively showing the value of IT in your environment. But getting to that level directly conflicts with having those siloed tools and individual point tools in your environment. So please remember that we're trying to focus on how IT provides the service to the user regardless of where any of the individual components for that service are housed, be them physical, virtual, or cloud. Now, another key reason that it's challenging to monitor virtual or mixed environments is that the topology and the cross-silo dependencies between the different application components become very, very muddy and very unclear. So perhaps you have your web front-end servers living in the cloud, your application or middle-tier servers running on your own virtualization stack, then your database running on physical gear hooked into your physical SAN. It'd be very typical to have a layout like this so you can handle changes in workload. But understanding the topology of these different pieces and how they actually talk to each other becomes very difficult in this mixed virtualized environment. So you need to make sure that you can understand that topology, understand how all of the different components talk to each other, and also remember that this new infrastructure, this new PVC infrastructure will change very quickly, much more quickly than in a physical environment. In the case of cloud instances, new instances can be spun up in seconds and put right into the workflow of your application. Finding a monitoring tool and a management practice that can keep up with that rate of change without detracting from some of those key business metrics that your end users are expecting is very important to move your IT delivery forward. Now, talking about this topology, and one of the weaknesses in having siloed individual point tools and not a unified view across your entire IT service is what happens when there's a failure. The simple problem of root cause analysis in a virtual environment is incredibly complex. So perhaps there's a challenge with your front-end IT service metrics, the end users experiencing a degradation in service quality, maybe it's response time, maybe they can't complete an order. Well, there could be any part of an application that's breaking. So in the specific example I put on the screen, perhaps the issue is actually in the application tier. Even though we do have a clustered application and distributed resources, there's one specific application component 2 or 3 levels down the chain of the IT service that's failing and causing an issue. Now, in a typical monitoring environment that I've been talking about, when an alert comes out for that application, it isn't going to be immediately clear where that specific problem is, or more importantly, who's actually responsible for dealing with that issue. So an email alert may come out saying, hey, we've identified there's a problem with your IT service, but that alert will end up going out to all of the different teams in your environment. It'll go to the DB team, to the application team, the storage team, and all of them will basically end up pointing fingers at each other, trying to, basically defer blame and say, clearly it's not the network problem, it's not a virtualization problem, maybe it's a J2E problem on the application level. your team is going to lose a great deal of time simply trying to figure out who's responsible for the issue instead of focusing on simply identifying where that root cause is easily and quickly with a single alert and then recovering from that problem. So these are some of those challenges that are inherent in the modern day mixed environment of physical, virtual, and cloud servers. So we're talking increased complexity, challenges around topology and the pace of change, having a monitoring and management framework that can keep up with a rapidly dynamically changing environment, then problems around root cause and ownership, because it becomes very unclear where the lines are drawn between applications, the VMs that are hosting them, or the VM hardware underneath, or the network that's keeping it all together. Having too many tools to deal with these types of problems can lead to a sea of red alerts. We're talking about dashboards in your environment that just show that everything is failing instead of pinpointing for you where the source of that problem is. At the end of the day, all of these things have a direct impact on your key business metrics, so maybe their mean time to repair, response time. And a number I'd like you to keep in mind is the cost related to this downtime. So all of these challenges may not appear to be unique or new in virtualized environments. Virtualization has been around for quite a while. But a recent number put forward by Gartner Corporation is that a conservative estimate pegs the cost of downtime in a modern data center at $42,000 per hour. So all of this inefficiency and this complexity in simply managing your environment will cost a tremendous amount to your organization in simply trying to figure out what's going on with an application versus being able to recover that application and return service levels to normal in your environment. So let's talk a little bit about being smarter about monitoring your PVC environment and how to keep it simple. And then I'll talk about 5 specific steps to help move forward in that simplified monitoring path. So the first thing that you should ask yourself is, how evolved is your IT monitoring process today? And generally when I talk to users, they fit into one of 3 or 4 buckets. So starting on the left, we have sort of the caveman. So these are people who are very early in their monitoring and maintenance or management frameworks and their processes. Maybe they actually have no monitoring in place at all. It's surprising in today's data centers how many of them are operating with either zero monitoring or automated management of their environment, or just enough to kind of get by. So basic up-down awareness, which at the end of the day doesn't help very much. Now the second stage in your evolution is what we call the reactive stage. This is where you do have more basic system and network metrics in place, but you spend most of your time fighting fires versus being able to move to the third stage in the evolution, which is being proactive. So being able to monitor your business services, proactively detect outages and work around them before they actually occur, which is our final stage, which we call outage avoidance. So you can see the evolution here mirroring the evolution on screen. All right, now most of the users that we talk to fall directly into that reactive bucket. So they may not realize how much time they're actually spending simply reacting to problems versus getting more proactive about it. But we generally find that only 16% of organizations are able to actually get to the proactive stage where they're able to prevent performance issues. So thinking back to that $42,000 per hour number, that's an incredible amount of lost time, lost resources spent simply reacting to problems instead of being able to get a little bit smarter about monitoring your environment, moving to be more proactive, and moving to full-on outage avoidance. Now, another way to look at this in terms of why it's so important to get smarter is moving along these levels of IT maturity. If you're on the left-hand side, so you're at that basically no monitoring or break-fix stage, you're in what we call a heart attack zone. Right? So as an IT organization, but also as an individual, you're going to spend most of your time simply trying to make sure everything's up and running. The stress levels will be phenomenal on your team, all kinds of wasted resources, all kinds of tension. You want to be moving up towards the automated outage avoidance, which is what we call the promotion or bonus zone. Because if you're able to get your IT to being totally automated, able to get in front of issues before your end users ever notice there's a problem, that will go a long distance towards making sure that the perception of IT is maintained and that you individually or your team is recognized as delivering a high quality service and worthy of perhaps a little bit of extra money at the end of the quarter or some more staff down the line. Another number that I want you to keep in mind is that we find that organizations that are able to implement an end-to-end application visibility package, so a unified monitoring framework that moves them along to getting smarter, they are 89% more likely to prevent incidents before users notice. So without any user impact at all, these proactive, more mature IT organizations who are smarter about their management are able to avoid almost 90% of the problems in their environment. That's an incredible number. So now another question. It's relatively simple, but some key questions to ask about your own monitoring process and your own management process. Just, is your process smart? So what do I mean by that? Well, first, does your monitoring solution watch over your entire IT infrastructure and IT service delivery process? If it doesn't, that's something you may need to fix. Can systems and services auto-recover after an outage? So do you have to have human intervention to actually recover systems in your environment, or is that something that you're able to automate? Can your infrastructure self-heal during periods of performance degradation and auto-provision additional capacity if necessary? Tools like Uptime that take you along this journey from basic immature systems monitoring to a true unified package are able to provide that self-healing and automated provisioning. Are your monitoring tools topology aware, and do they auto-escalate alerts to the right people at the right time? So thinking back to that example of the sea of red or the alerts coming out to every member across every silo instead of directly to the team that needs to resolve the problem. Is your tool actually topology aware and able to detect changes in that topology and automatically figure out who's the right person to receive an alert in the event of an outage? Can you measure the availability of key business service metrics like your mean time to repair and your overall application user experience and response time? Those are the metrics that you want to be able to report back to your end users. So if you're not able to even track those today, you need to make sure that you find a tool that can do that for you. Do you have a monitoring tool soup, or do you have a unified IT dashboard, so a single tool providing all of monitoring across all of your silos? And the last question, I'll talk a little bit about this later on in the presentation. What is your total cost of monitoring, and which way is it trending? So is it actually getting more expensive for you to monitor and manage your environment, or are you becoming more efficient? Is it getting easier to manage your environment? I'll talk about some of the specific things to think about in that total cost of monitoring in a few slides. So those are 7 key questions that you can ask yourself about your own monitoring process to identify whether there's specific gaps that you can look at, specific things that you can push toward by implementing a tool like Uptime to move forward in your IT maturity. Now let's talk about 5 specific steps to help simplify monitoring your environment. So the first step, monitor everything all the time. What you should be looking for is a tool like Uptime that will provide one unified IT dashboard that allows you to monitor, alert, and report on availability, performance, and capacity across all of your applications, IT services, all of your network devices, and most importantly, all of your virtual servers, physical servers, and cloud servers. And ideally, it can integrate easily with other tools in your environment. Getting to that single unified tool is the biggest first step in moving forward your IT monitoring and management. Step 2 is being able to automate recovery, self-healing, and capacity provisioning. So ideally we want to automate everything, but the goal at the end of the day is just to work as little as possible. So there's going to be some things that you simply can't automate or perhaps politically are too risky to automate. We want to try to take off some of the low-hanging fruit, right? So let's automate server recovery, so rebooting a server if it fails or it's in a hung state. Let's automate application and service restarts. So if a thread or a specific service on a server fails, let's automatically restart that, or or send it a command that'll force it to kind of resync itself with reality and improve delivery to the end user. You want to look for the ability to automatically spin up additional resources when capacity thresholds come within 80 and 90% of being exceeded, be it CPU, memory, I/O at the disk, or network level. Particularly in virtualized environments, there's no hard caps on the physical resources that can be assigned to different VMs. So being able to detect performance problems within those individual VMs or individual pieces in your environment and be able to dynamically change those resources to handle bursts in required resources, that will be essential to help get in front of problems. So help to allocate extra resources, extra capacity before the end user load is so much that it actually causes an application failure. Right, this technology that does all of this automation is available, easy to deploy, and highly affordable. Right, you can have results or excuses in your environment, but you really can't have both. It is absolutely doable and achievable to automate all of these things using a tool like Uptime in your environment. Step number 3, implement an intelligent alerting and escalation process. So this comes back to our whole sea of red story and the whole siloed challenge where it isn't clear where the root cause of a problem is or who should actually be responsible for recovering that problem. So you should implement a notification and escalation scheme based on how your team operates. So ensure that the tooling that you're implementing allows you to define multi-level auto-escalation that is either time-based or response-based, by role, by region, or other custom grouping. You should find a tool whose alerting engine is flexible enough that you can tune it to exactly your needs so it fits into your existing operations and helps to improve them. You want to make sure that it's able to notify the right people at the right time to, again, to avoid those sea of red alert storms where everyone's getting alert and everyone is convinced that the problem isn't actually their problem, and perhaps at the end of the day, no one actually moves toward resolving the issue. You also want to be able to test and validate your notification process at least once a quarter. So being able to go through your entire escalation chain, your entire email alerting chain or SMS, mobile pager alerting chain, and just validate that it's still working, that all the numbers are right, that all the escalation processes are working, and do this in a way that doesn't actually impact your availability or delivery numbers, right? So basically simulate a full-on escalation package without directly impacting or triggering any recovery level of events. And then you also want to be able to produce reports and save historical data, right? So, track how many alerts were handled through auto recovery and provisioning, on events requiring manual action, who was alerted and when, how your mean time to repair has evolved. Look for a tool that can intelligently implement and automate all of these things. Step 4 is a slightly higher level task, and this is the ability to report business service metrics to your customers. So if you're a team that right now is totally focused on low-level metrics at the database level or the server level and not able to actually talk about the business metrics that your components are delivering, you need to start moving that conversation upwards and find yourself a tool that will actually monitor all of these things. This is very important to you for career longevity, so being able to prove the value and how good your IT team actually is within your organization. It will also help you and your customers flourish, right? So you'll be able to prove that you're delivering more effective services over time. What you should be reporting? Well, you want to report on critical application or critical services availability. Focus your metrics on what brings dollar value to your business, what adds the most financial value and emotional value to your business. Focus on the infrastructure services and your end user experience and those overall service delivery numbers back to the end user. Where do you put this information? Well, you should have a solution that allows you to either integrate these numbers into third-party tools, so maybe your own self-service portal or your own corporate dashboards. All right. Also, ideally, your tool that is monitoring these numbers has a nice streamlined dashboard that is both end-user or business-friendly for the consumers of IT, but at the same time can produce a secondary dashboard where your whole IT department can see more of the internals of your service delivery and focus on key low-level metrics. And then you'll want to review where you're putting this information, how you're trending on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis, both within your team, so within your IT department, but then also with, of course, the end users, the consumers of IT. If you're able to get to this level, reporting on those business service metrics, you'll be able to absolutely guarantee your level of service of IT and prove that you're either improving that service or identify early in the cycle if your service delivery is starting to fail and identify ways that you can improve that service long term. Step 5, monitor your total cost of monitoring. So monitor the cost of monitoring, right, and manage your ROI, right? So the first thing to keep in mind here for that total cost of monitoring, you've got to eliminate that tool soup, right? It's just insane to have, 5, 6, over 10 tools to monitor different components of your environment. You're really wasting a lot of time maintaining all those individual tools and wasting a lot of time not being able to recover services effectively because of the miscommunication and lack of clarity that arises from having that tool soup scenario. If you're using a Big Four framework for monitoring, there's a potential here that you're wasting 400 to 500%. It's not a typo. The amount of money dedicated to those Big Four, Big Five framework tools, a lot of organizations have them. A lot of organizations have spent years trying to roll them out effectively, and a lot of them have found that it doesn't actually deliver the value that it should be delivering. Right? Monitoring should not be a full-time job. It shouldn't require consultants to roll out. It should be easy to both roll out and to maintain and allow you to actually get more effective and focus on the things that matter to your business, not focus on simply maintaining your monitoring. So you also want to track your total cost of monitoring quarterly and annually, just like your delivery values, and over 3 years. What way is that cost trending? Does the trend make sense? And then you want to make sure that you're, of course, defining and continually measuring your ROI. So what goes into that total cost of monitoring? I mentioned a few of those things already. But I tend to think that it's a combination of 5 different buckets that go into the total cost. So the first one, of course, is the software license fee. Now, a lot of different products will have a relatively low initial license fee, but you need to keep in mind, what are the costs of annual support? What's the cost down the line for professional services? Are we going to need setup or customizations to implement the monitoring tool in your environment? Do we need to spend a lot of time tuning this with professional services people on site? Is there a lot of training that will be required? And are there heavy internal costs to simply manage? Right? So do you need to allocate massive server resources just to maintain your monitoring tool? Do you need to dedicate hundreds or potentially thousands of staff hours just to managing your monitoring? All of these things are very important to keep in mind for the true total cost of monitoring for a monitoring package, not just that initial software license fee. And also on the lines of software license fees, you should be looking for a tool that has an easy to understand license model and ideally a one-size-fits-all licensing approach where you're not going to pay for additional modules down the line. You don't need to pay for expanding your monitoring at a future date. So for example, if you want to monitor 3 different things on a server and then find out 12 months from now that you want to monitor 10 or 20 different things on that server, you shouldn't have to worry about whether that costs you more. Right? A tool like Uptime makes it easy to calculate what your licensing cost will be, and it's very predictable as your environment grows, how much it will cost you in the long term. So again, those 5 steps to help simplify your monitoring and management and move you up that evolution chain in terms of IT maturity. First is monitor everything and do that all the time. The second is that you want to automate recovery, self-healing, and capacity provisioning in your environment. You want to be able to implement an intelligent alerting and escalation process, report on business service metrics to your customer, and monitor your total cost of monitoring and management and manage that ROI long term. So that wraps up the majority of what I want to talk about today. So I'd like to take a moment to pause for Q&A. So I saw a few questions come in, but please, if you are online, please use the chat panel to ask any questions, and I'll do my best to get to them. And once again, just while we're waiting, if you are a reseller, there are many different resources available online about the Uptime product and about Uptime's software. If you're an end user or a reseller who just wants to try out Uptime, we do offer a free 30-day evaluation online. We guarantee you'll have it installed in a matter of minutes and be able to see that you're gathering all of those key metrics that we talked about and start your trip along that path towards IT maturity. All right, so let's take a second to answer some of the questions here. So the first is that, in terms of Uptime specifically, do we need agents for Uptime? And that's actually a great question. So Uptime provides options for agentless or agent-based monitoring. So of course, agentless, we support WMI and SNMP, really any API that's available, for example, the VMware vCenter APIs, a number of different agentless options to monitor different platforms, but we do also offer that agent-based offering to go and install an uptime agent on your target servers. And this agent is incredibly lightweight. It doesn't store a local database, maybe consumes about 1% of CPU and 10 megs of RAM on the system. And it actually enables some key features that go into this whole evolution of IT that I talk about. So specifically the ability to automatically detect internal failures on these target systems and trigger proactive self-healing and recovery options. So without that uptime agent, you maybe wouldn't be able to do things like restart a service on a Linux box reliably, or restart a Windows server itself. All right, so that uptime agent really enables some of those more advanced self-healing and some of those deeper metrics that you wouldn't be able to get through an API or agentless option. All right, someone else asked, if we have different teams for each of the silos, each using their own tool, how do we start the conversation about moving up to a unified tool and really maturing our IT processes? So I think the best answer to that question, the best way to kind of start the ball rolling, is to really come back to that question of the cost of downtime in your environment, right? And the cost of the overhead time required simply to get to the root cause of an issue in your environment across all these tools, and what is that actually costing your end users and costing your key business metrics. Right, if you're able to focus on those things, so focus on the high-level cost of the outages, focus on whether you're improving IT service delivery or not, focusing on those things generally helps to bring the conversation a little bit further upstream and really highlight the importance of having a unified tool to monitor your entire physical, virtual, and cloud environment. The last question I'll talk about before wrapping up is just very straightforward. How much does uptime cost? So uptime is licensed based on the server platform that you're monitoring, flat price for everything. So be it a VM or a physical Linux or physical Windows, an AIX system, a Solaris system, any of those you're going to pay a simple $99 license fee, and that's going to enable all of the different uptime components for that particular platform. So as many service monitors as you want, as many metrics as you want, as many reports or users as you want. It's one fee, and that fee is never going to change, and that gives you the complete uptime product, which is not actually a suite of several different tools like a lot of competitors in our space. It's actually a single product where you get all of the uptime capabilities from that single install file. Now, at that $99 per server, of course, that is the starting price. There are volume discounts and discounts available for different types of educational organizations and so on and so forth. So I'd like to thank everybody for your time today. Again, a copy of this presentation will be made available. If you would like to reach out to me directly with any additional questions, my email address is listed on this final slide. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.